Hi, recap'd here. Today I am going to explain a American romance drama. A woman returns to her Orthodox Jewish community that shunned her for her attraction to a female childhood friend. Once back, their passions reignite as they explore the boundaries of faith and sexuality. From a screenplay by Sebastian Lelio and Rebecca Lankiewicz, the film follows a woman as she returns to her Orthodox Jewish community that shunned her decades earlier for an attraction to a female childhood friend. Once back, their passions reignite as they explore the boundaries of faith and sexuality. Based on Naomi Alderman's book, the film stars Rachel Weisz, Rachel McAdams and Alessandro Nivola. In a Jewish Orthodox synagogue in Hendon, the frail Rav Krushka, Anton Lesser, collapses whilst giving a sermon. As funeral rites commence in London, the rabbi's exiled daughter Ronit Krushka, Rachel Weisz, is living her life as a photographer in Manhattan. During a photo shoot she is told by the Brooklyn synagogue of her father's death. Wounded by the news and in a vulnerable state, she gets drunk in a local bar and sleeps with an undetermined man. Ronit flies home to London where she feels out of place in the Orthodox Jewish community she left behind. She is greeted at the home of David Cooperman, Alessandro Nivola, a son figure to the Rav, who is taken aback by the unexpected return of his childhood friend. Her welcome inside the home is hostile from those in the community gathering in the Rav's honor. Her aunt Faruma Hartig, Bernice Stigers, greets her more openly, though the air is frosty between Ronit and her uncle Moshe Hartig, Alan Kraduner. Ronit is both upset and angry that she was not informed of her father's illness and that her father's obituary claims he was childless. Despite tensions surrounding Ronit's sudden departure in the past, David invites her to stay with him and his wife. Ronit is shocked to discover that he is married to their former best friend Esty, Rachel McAdams, now a teacher at an Orthodox girls' school. It is uncomfortable between the two women, a complicated past is clearly hanging over them. The next day Ronit visits her father's grave. After further prayers at their home, David, Esty and Ronit go to a dinner at the Hartig house with Rabbi Goldfarb, Nicholas Woodson, and Rebbetzin Goldfarb, Liza Sadovi. Ronit tries to talk to her uncle about selling her father's house, but he tells her now is not the right time for such a topic. Conversation turns to Ronit's successful career as a photographer and Rebbetzin questions why she goes by Ronnie Curtis after seeing one of her photos in a magazine. Esty, quietly joining in the conversation, states that women change their names all the time when they get married and lose their own history. Everyone is silently shocked at Esty's controversial comment. Appearing near Gerald's head, Jessie realizes this is a critical situation. Her loud screams don't help since the house is isolated with no neighbors in sight. In the late afternoon, she starts hearing rustling just outside the open window. Then soft footsteps enter the house. It's the stray dog and it starts slowly going towards Gerald's body, but Jessie tells the dog to get away. The dog doesn't listen and starts to lick the blood. Then it begins biting off Gerald's arm. Jessie grabs the Midnight Mass book on the shelf and tosses it towards the dog to scare it. The dog doesn't care about Jessie's threat and it just chews the piece of arm by the door. Suddenly, Gerald gets up from the ground and starts yelling at Jessie for feeding the dog. Jessie realizes that this is a hallucination because Gerald's body is still on the floor. Gerald starts talking about a misogynist joke he had made once. But the point of it is to snap Jessie out of her mental breakdown. Gerald tells Jessie the time is ticking and that there will be no gardeners or maid coming by any time soon. Jessie slips her hands out of the cuffs, then breaks the post of the bed to get out of the other one. However, she realizes this was another hallucination and she's still cuffed to the bed. She starts hallucinating seeing herself and Gerald having a conversation. These two remind Jessie that Gerald had put the cup of water on the shelf. Jessie struggles to grab the cup, only to find out that she is unable to drink from it. She struggles to put it back on the shelf, but does so without spilling it. The manifestations of Jessie and Gerald help keep the real Jessie sane by getting her to focus on the next task at hand. They remind Jessie that the tag for her new clothing item is still on the shelf. She makes a straw out of the tag, and finally she is able to sip water out of the cup. While Jessie dozes off to sleep, The dog hears noises just outside the house. Jessie wakes up from the dog barking, then she suddenly sees a man in the corner. The weird man has a disfigured head, so Jessie assumes he's not real. Gerald calls her Mouse, and this causes Jessie to remember a past memory when she was young. Her dad used to call her Mouse. They go to the lake house as a family, but Jessie isn't interested in going into the water. Her mom gets upset about this because Jessie is such a daddy's girl who never wants to spend time with the family. Jessie overhears her mom talking badly about her. Most of the family go out on the boat, but Jessie and her dad stay behind. Her dad tells Jessie the dress she has on makes her look like a proper young woman. Then, her dad makes Jessie sit closer to her while they look at the eclipse. Eventually, he convinces Jessie to sit on his lap for old time's sake. She does this, but her dad does something inappropriate to her while she sits there. Suddenly, Jessie wakes up and realizes her hand has been losing circulation all night. She's experiencing a lot of painful cramps, while she tells herself to get the blood flowing again. Gerald brings up why Jessie never disclosed this memory of her dad with him. Jessie says it was too painful to share, and she wanted to forget it. However, her hallucination tells her that is exactly why she married an older man. It was the only dynamic she ever knew. Jessie feels guilty and shame about what happened. She starts to blame everyone but her father. Even makes excuses for his sick behavior by saying he never touched her. He just touched himself with Jessie on his lap. She also blamed her very short sundress. She starts to remember another bad memory that happened with her father. He had brought her into a room and talked to her. However, everything after that seemed like a dream to her. She saw a well and it was filled with secrets. Then Gerald challenges her hallucinations. He says the man she saw in the corner was real. His footsteps even remains on the floor. Gerald tells her that the man was Death himself, and Death is coming back tonight. Jessie starts to remember her past again. Her father goes into her room and apologizes for what happened. Jessie steps back a bit afraid of her father, but then she finally sits on the bed with him. Her dad begins to manipulate Jessie into keeping this a secret from her mom. Jessie even agrees to never disclose this information to anyone. Jessie begins to bite her nails and cries, begging her dad she will keep this a secret, without realizing that her dad manipulated her to this conclusion. Once her dad is done talking to her, his mood shifts quickly to cheerful as he leaves the room. Jessie plops on the bed, then realizes the creepy man is licking her feet. Jessie wakes up and sees it's the dog who chomps on her foot. Jessie kicks the dog away, so the dog decides to just eat more of Gerald. By now, Jessie's lips are chapped from being dehydrated. Gerald begins to scare her of how she'll be discovered dead. Jessie starts to embrace her fate as she hums a lullaby, then falls asleep. In her dream, she sees the eclipse and the sky is blood red. She goes into the bedroom to find her younger self handcuffed. She apologizes to the younger version of herself for not speaking up. Jessie admits that whenever she looked at her younger sister, she felt guilty and afraid that her dad would eventually do the same thing to her little sister. The younger Jessie tells her that she had everything to survive. This sparks a memory of Jessie at dinner. When her mother wonders if Jessie had fun at the house with her did, Jessie squeezes the glass cup so hard, it shatters in her hand. Her father helps her, and her mother stares at her confused, but worried. This memory makes Jessie realize that she can use the glass to cut her hand, and use the blood to slip out of the handcuffs. Her hallucinations start to argue against doing this. However, Jessie thinks this idea is better than dying of dehydration. She has to do everything really quick because she's already dehydrated. She grabs the cup and shatters it on the shelf. She uses a shard to cut her wrist and the palm of her hand. Then she tries really hard to slip out of the cuffs, basically skinning herself alive. Even though one arm is free, she is still cuffed on the other side. She grabs her cell phone using her feet, only to find out that it's dead and needs to be recharged. She starts to drag the bed towards the keys to handcuffs, while the hungry dog stares at her. She uses her skinned hand to grab the keys and she shouts in pain. She's able to use her mouth and keys to unlock herself. Then she quickly rehydrates herself. Afterwards, she bandages up her hand to prevent more blood loss. However, she starts feeling lightheaded and collapses. Then, she wakes up to the dog trying to chew her arm off. She shoos the dog away, only to find her husband's face all chewed up on the ground. When she gets up, the dog hears something in the hallway. He growls but then runs away. Jesse sees the creepy man in the hallway and decides to walk towards him. He wants Jesse's jewelry to add to his collection, so Jesse gives him her ring. She leaves the place with the car and starts driving away before her husband waves her farewell. While driving, Jessie has trouble staying awake. She swerves, then suddenly she's transported in one of her dreams with a blood-stained sky. The creepy man is in the back seat. He goes to Jessie and whispers the word, "Mouse?" Jessie then crashes the car head-on into a tree. The neighbors hear this. Luckily, she's still alive. Jessie honks the horns to get the neighbors' attention. They go to her as Jessie gets out of the car only to collapse. A few months later, Jessie starts to write a letter with her messed-up hand. After the accident, Jessie lied to the cops saying she had amnesia. She knew better than anyone that a painful traumatic experience sometimes causes you to block out those memories. Gerald's life insurance kicked in and Jessie was able to live somewhat a normal life. However, every night, the creepy man would visit her. She says no cops ever found her wedding ring. What kept her alive was remembering her younger self. She finally understood that her father's shackles was silence, her husband's was comfort. Jessie decided to start a foundation using Gerald's insurance money, for young girls and boys who had experienced something similar in their life. She now tells her own experience to these young people. 6 months after the accident, the creepy man was actually caught. He wasn't just in Jessie's imagination. He was a gravedigger stealing people's jewelry. Jessie had mistaken her husband's mangled face as the dog's doing. However, it was the gravedigger. He would cut people's ears and eat it. He would then sleep with the bodies of the dead, but only the men. Jesse was lucky in this regard. This gravedigger was finally caught by the police in his sister's home. He had eaten his sister, and his sister's husband. He had killed more than 12 people, but for some reason he had spared Jessie. Jessie gives this letter to her younger self, saying that the people who were supposed to protect you from monsters, were monsters themselves. During the creepy man's trial, he refused to talk to anyone. Jessie decides to go to the courtroom, and for the first time, the creepy man talks. He releases himself from the zip ties. Police apprehend him while Jessie walks towards the man. The man transforms into her dad, then Gerald, then back to the gravedigger. Jessie smirks and says he's so much smaller than she remembers. She walks away as the eclipse finally releases the sun. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like, it really helps the channel.